Welcome back, class. We're going to jump in here on segment 2, and in chapter 11, we're going to talk about an oligopoly. And the text starts out talking about competition among a few, mutual interdependence. What does that mean? A situation in which the outcomes available to two or more parties depend on the choices that each party makes, as well as the choices of the other party. If you go back to some of your micro classes that maybe you've had in the past, or if you get out and surf the internet a little, it talks about, strategic interdependence. Success and failure depends on its actions, a firm's actions, as well as the actions of the other firms. A good example that I typically use in class is I think back to the San Diego healthcare market. So lived in San Diego for, 20 some years. And the market for healthcare, especially in the hospitals, there were two 800-pound gorilla hospital systems. You had Scripps and you had Sharp. You also had some outlying hospitals. You had University of California, San Diego, UCSD, which teaching research hospital, had a medical school, did a lot of work with the VA facility there in San Diego, had Mercy Healthcare or Mercy Hospital that served pretty much part of Catholic Healthcare West and did a lot of work with an indigent population. And then you had a kind of a standalone children's hospital, even though down toward the end they started I don't want to say a partnership, but they started to align themselves with Sharp Reese Steele. And what happens is so basically an oligopoly. You had two huge hospital systems, and the decisions when it came to selling healthcare goods and services to health plans, the success or failure of both systems depended on how they negotiated the contractual rates with each health plan. And in Southern California, you had them all. Blue Cross, there were some Blue Cross plans there. There was Health Net, or now it's called Centene. You had United. You had Aetna, you had all of the big dogs in Southern California vying for that Southern California healthcare market, especially on the health plan side. And so the decisions that these two hospital systems made generated this mutual interdependence. And the profitability, at least on the revenue side, it generated mutual interdependence, because as they negotiated rates with health plans for, med-surg beds, ambulatory surgery services, emergency room services, whatever service that the hospital system provided, that was going to help them generate revenue. It was going to, remember, when we go back and we talk about profit, it's total revenue minus total cost, and that was going to help increase that total revenue side of that equation. Didn't really impact the cost, but it was going to improve that total revenue side. And so you had senior management of these hospitals or these hospital systems. I'm not sure they call each other friends, but they had some level of respect to each other. They were professionals in the market. They belonged to a lot of maybe they all belonged to the same country club. They went to, maybe their kids went to the same private school. Maybe the children went to Bishop School in La Jolla. Maybe they went to La Jolla Country Day or Francis Parker. Some of the big private schools there in the area may play golf together, maybe in the same social circles. You don't know, but it's an assumption that most people made in Southern California, is that while they might not have shared financial information from the contractual aspect, there were probably some bits and pieces that were shared back and forth, and you just always felt like at the end of the day that each hospital system had a reasonably good idea of what the other one was going to do and how the decisions made by one were going to impact the profit margin of the other one. So that's what we're going to talk about, mutual interdependence. In an oligopoly, situations where a market is dominated by a few mutually interdependent terms. Industry dominated by a few terms, and if there's only two firms dominating the market, like in Southern California might have been, it's called a duopoly. Firms may produce identical products, or they may have differentiated products. Substantial barriers to entry into the industry. Firms are mutually interdependent. They keep banging on mutually interdependent, and it is a very significant factor in an oligopoly. And then when you're looking at oligopolies, you get into this measuring the concentration. Stockbrokers, especially if they're looking at firms based on their market and trying to make determinations on which stocks to buy based on the market concentration of a firm, they start trying to measure the concentration. It's how much of a market share implies dominance. Concentration ratio, it's a percent of output accounted for by the largest firm in an industry. So you're trying to figure out, okay, what is that concentration of power in the largest firm? And then what do maybe the next 4 or 5 firms look like? And in the text, they do a good job of outlining some of the industries that stockbrokers at the stock market is especially interested in. The higher the ratio, the closer to monopoly the firm is, and the greater the interdependence between firms. So if you've got a couple of firms in a market, and one of them's generating 45% and the other one's generating 50%, that's pretty close. Doesn't leave much, 5% for the other few firms in the marketplace that are trying to generate a profit in that marketplace. But the concentrations between those two firms, if they're high enough and if they're close enough, it's going to give, especially again, gives the stock market, a better idea of what the mutual interdependence is going to look like. Lower ratios, closer to perfect competition, or could be closer to monopolistic competition. And then they talk about a Herfindahl Hushman index, and it's HHI. If you're interested, at least that's where they abbreviated it, the acronym they use in the textbook. And it's an alternative measure of concentration found by squaring the percent share, the stated percent squares, the whole number of each firm in an industry, then summing these squared market shares. A lot of that information is provided by the Census Bureau. So provided by a government entity, and you can kind of take it for what it's worth. As far as an accuracy perspective, it is, again, it's government, it's a government entity. So it's not necessarily a private entity. So you can take the quality of the information for kind of what it is. And the census issues, they list 3 of them. Again, government agencies, there's always going to have some issues. Industry categories are too broad, reflect shares of a national market, and they overstate the degree of actual concentrations. So how many stockbrokers use this HHI, or how much of the stock market uses HHI? Hard to say, but the text actually gives you 2 sources of information of concentration if you're looking at industries or particular industries and trying to determine what the probability is that firms in those industries are going to generate either the return on investment or capital appreciation or dividends that the stock market or players in the stock market are looking for. And then they start going through on trying to tie the oligopoly to, and I hate to call them games, but somewhat to games, as they talk about the prisoner's dilemma, they talk about the Carnot model, and we will kind of walk through these. You don't deal, at least in the real world, at least where I've worked, you don't deal with them a lot, but at least it's good to know kind of how they operate. In an oligopolistic model, it competes, undercut on price, floods the market, competes on quantity, differentiates products, and improving quality. So that's what you're kind of looking at as far as how these oligopolies are going to compete in the market. Again, they either undercut each other on price, they flood the market, or compete on quantity, they differentiate their products, and lastly, they try to at least give the perception that they're improving quality. And when it comes to profit maximization, no one size fits all. The model uses quantity to bring to the central market, whatever the marketplace is that these firms are operating in. And again, the text talks about a duopoly, and that's where you have an oligopoly or an oligopolistic market in which there are two firms that are pretty much driving it. Collusion is somewhat, competitors work together to increase profit. Collusion, antitrust laws, hard to prove. You've got overt collusion when firms openly agree on price, output, and other decisions aimed at achieving monopoly profits. So this is overt collusion. You've also, and I don't know whether they went through it in this text or not, you talk about tacit collusion, and that's a little less, it's individuals getting together, meeting, maybe playing golf, nothing written down, and they're sharing information, trying to determine how to, for a market economy, how to price products, how much quantity to produce, how they're going to advertise and approach the consumers. And then they talk about cartel, and it's firms that coordinate their activities through overt collusion and by forming collusive coordinating mechanisms. Cartels, at least in the United States, as far as I know, are illegal. But think about the drug cartels in Mexico. Think about the cartels in the Pacific, functioning in the Pacific Rim. Actually, go on down into South America and think about the cartels and think about the way they do business. Equilibrium price and quantity for an oligopoly is in between the monopoly and the pure competition. So they're generating prices and quantities in an equilibrium setting that's going to lay, if you think about the continuum of markets, you've got the monopoly on one end, you've got perfect competition on the other end, or the other tail, if you want to look at a distribution. And then in the middle, you've got monopolistic competition, you've got, oligopolies, and there's some other kind of hybrid markets in there. But on an oligopoly, their equilibrium price and quantity is going to be somewhere between a monopoly and a pure competitive market. The ideal cartel outcome is to imitate a monopoly, but they cheat. Cartels are legal in the United States, and only purpose is to resist competition, transfer dollars from consumers to the cartel, and cost society a deadweight loss. That's what you got going on with cartels. What's a cartel that most people have heard of? If you get away from the nefarious, drug cartels and the cartels in kind of the Pacific Rim, what about OPEC? We talked about OPEC in one of the earlier chapters. OPEC functions as a cartel, and it tries to control the supply of crude oil. And by controlling the supply of crude oil, they try to keep prices at a level where they're all going to make money. Problem with cartels, as you've seen multiple times in history, with OPEC, they cheat. They can't help themselves. it's just hard to keep everybody in line in a environment that functions as a cartel. May not convince all firms to join. And then here's where I couldn't remember, but here's where they talk about tacit collusion, an unwritten, unspoken understanding through which firms agreed to limit their competition. Again, make decisions out on the golf course, make decisions at the local sports bar. They go to financial meetings. They go to charity auctions. They go, and there's no paper trail. Never going to be a paper trail in tacit collusion, but it does serve a purpose, and it does to a certain extent help control supply, and again, to a certain extent, helps keep profits at a margin, or profits so that keeps price at a level so that profit margins are maintained. Follow the price leadership of a particular firm. If I go back to healthcare, and I may be going out on a limb here, but if I'm talking about hospitals in the Nashville market, I just, if I were to ask people that didn't live in the Nashville market, what is the number one hospital in the Nashville market? And most people are going to say Vanderbilt. They don't say St. Thomas. They don't say Meharry. I think there's a TriStar Hospital, maybe TriStar Hospital. There's some other hospitals there's multiple hospitals in the Nashville area. That just happens to be the ones I can remember the names. But I can remember, growing up as in Southern Kentucky, and if you had an illness that you needed some specialized health care for, first thing the providers did in Southern Kentucky is they just sent you to Vanderbilt. I mean, that was just a foregone conclusion. So that's what, and so I guess the point I'm trying to make is are the hospital systems, or all of the independent, let's say, hospitals in the Nashville market, are they playing with tacit collusion? Is Vanderbilt going to set the hospital rates that the majority of the hospitals in the Nashville market charge to health plans, or charge to direct care, private pay individuals for healthcare services? Hard to say, but I wouldn't be surprised if there is not a hospital, whether it's Vanderbilt or another hospital, that is serving that function for the number of hospitals in Nashville as they try to drive that equilibrium price and quantity. And then the text spends a few minutes talking about game theory and oligopoly behavior. Dominant oligopoly firms recognize that they are interdependent. Decisions impact each other. If they're smart, they understand this. Anticipate the responses of rivals and factor this response into their own decisions. And then the authors, that they spend some time talking about game theory, a method of analyzing strategic choices in situations of mutual interdependence. Again, oligopolists, you have to decide on the price, you have to decide on the marketing strategies, and you have to determine, are you going to either develop new products or improve the products that you have now, and what are you going to do as far as product differentiation? So you have senior management at all of these oligopolies. They're going through the same type of decision-making process. Vanderbilt, St. Thomas, TriStar, Meharry, the senior management of those hospitals are all trying to go through these iterations, trying to figure out what everybody else is doing. Maybe they're looking to a hospital that is going to drive rates, and they can, maybe not cookie cutter, because not all hospitals provide the same level of services, but they may be looking at a hospital in the national market to kind of be the leader of the pack and drive markets and assist in the other hospitals' decisions on the equilibrium price and quantity of their goods and services. When you're talking about game theory, choices imply some kind of benefit or incur some kind of cost. Payoff rewards punishment from the outcome of a strategic decision. Any hospital CEO is going to tell you that there are definitely rewards and punishments from the strategic decisions that they make on a daily basis. I'm sure that being a hospital CEO in the national market or any market is going to be a extremely stressful situation. But again, that's why they get paid the big bucks, is to absorb that stress and to make those strategic decisions. Payoff is measured in dollars of profit, depends on the firm's strategic choices and strategic choices of the rivals. Comes back to the mutual interdependence. Players, strategies, and payoffs. That's what they're all talking about when they're talking about game theory. And then they move from game theory into the prisoner's dilemma. And basically that works off of a little, I think it was a 2x2 payoff matrix. It's a visual tool used to depict economic gains. It summarizes the players, their available strategies, and the payoffs associated with each outcome. And yes, it is a 2x2 box. Can't remember which page it's on, but those of you that have the text, that have bought the text, you probably need to at least go, even if you haven't been reading the text, which, probably a crapshoot, based on, how many of you have actually read the text, but it would be worth your time, even if you never use it the rest of your career, just to go in. It's interesting the way the authors go through that Carnot theory, the game theory, the prisoner's dilemma. It's just an interesting exercise, and from my perspective, I enjoyed reading it. It'd been a while since I'd kind of gone through it. In fact, it'd been since graduate school that I'd gone through it. But I think it'd be worth. Well, I say it takes you an hour to read through it. I think it'd be well worth the hour to read through it. Dominant strategy, when a player's best strategy is the same regardless of the action of the other player. So in this prisoner's dilemma, everybody goes in with a dominant theory or a dominant strategy. Nash equilibrium, an outcome in an economic game in which each player plays his best response to the strategic chosen by the other player. That's the definition of a Nash equilibrium. Dominant strategy equilibrium, an equilibrium outcome in which each player has and plays his or her dominant strategy. They also go through the cartel game, and then they get into, right down toward the last of that, they get into repetition in the Carnot game. It's a trick. They talk about a trigger strategy. Situation in which a firm makes clear that it is willing and able to respond to cheating by permanently revoking an agreement. The example they gave, and the example they used in the text on some of this, male and female live in a small community, and they call it fizzy water. I got the impression from natural springs, but they carry water down and they sell it in the community. And they're trying to discern, how many buckets to take down and how many. And they go through cartel theory and, cartel game theory. And at the end of the day, they get into this trigger strategy. And it's basically saying, and the cartels, I guess, use it a lot. It basically gets into the situation, if you're powerful enough, and if you find your others in the area cheating, if you're powerful and willing and able to respond to cheating by permanently revoking an agreement, and that, to me, that is some type of market power. If you've got that kind of market power over the competitors in your area. And with that, we're going to stop, and then we'll come back. I don't know whether we will be able to finish up the chapter in this third segment or not, but we'll give it a shot. Talk to everybody soon.